Because we just do what we want when we want to do it.
Perfect.
We are live,
Every day is
just so you know.
Thank you. See if Lisa gets, you good? You're in?
Sorry, Chuck.
All right. With that, and seeing as it is 4 o'clock, good afternoon, everyone like to call to order the work session for the Frisco Town Council. I have the roll call, please. Here.
Aronson.
Here.
Burley, absent. Held.
Here.
Incan.
Here.
Plenko.
Here.
Scripsack, Adrian, absent.
Thank you so much. First item on this afternoon's agenda is the continued affordable housing strategies discussion. And Noah's here. Welcome, and it's all yours. That was
Thanks.
an
Good
amazing
afternoon.
report.
A
Again.
presentation on the screen. I do. I just don't know what's happening. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. So we are talking about affordable housing strategies today. You remember Don and Leslie presented this topic back on March 8th. Since then, in lieu of organizing a formal retreat style council discussion on housing, we've been rolling out pieces of the housing plan at each work session since then. So today's presentation is intended to kind of wrap up that housing discussion that we've been having piecemeal over the last several months and provide direction to staff on how to move forward with the housing plan over the next year or so. That way we can quit bombarding you with staff reports and presentations, right? Yeah. So my presentation is organized into these 6 general topics. We'll start with some housing goals, give an overview of strategies and projects we have in place right now, talk about some potential strategies that could be considered in the future. I will provide an update on our housing budget and then conclude with some recommendations. All right, so these housing goals, Don and Leslie presented back on March 8th. I'll just run through them really quick. The top one is a very specific goal to have 306 deed restricted homes by the end of 2027. And the next one is a 5-year housing capital plan. We have already addressed that goal with the 10-year housing pro forma that I provided as an attachment to my report. And that's just something we have to continue to maintain and update, and we'll keep it on there as a goal because it is something that requires continuous maintenance. We also identified a goal of having a housing strategic plan. We do have the bones or the framework of a plan right now. We just don't have anything formal that we've adopted, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in my presentation. And then these next 3 goals all came from the town council's strategic plan of having 50% residents, developing the 619 Granite lot and the Sabatini lot. So with those goals, we do have some existing strategies in place to try to achieve those goals. The first one is town-owned rental units. So we own 18 rental units, 14 of them are available to Town of Frisco employees only. The other 4 are available to anyone who works in the 10-mile basin. All of the rent prices are determined based on the AMI chart. And as a part of the approval process, the tenants' incomes are verified. The next strategy is density bonus incentive. We just talked about that 2 weeks ago, so I won't go into detail on that one, but it basically just incentivizes private developers to build affordable units on their own. And so far we have 29 units produced from that particular tool. Land banking is defined as buying land and just holding it for future development. We are currently doing some land banking with the purchase of 810 Pitkin Alley. Our intent there is just vacant land. We're closing on Friday, and our intent is just to hold that for future workforce housing development. New construction goes hand in hand with land banking. Of course, if you're holding land and for future development, then at some point in the future, you plan for new construction, right? And that is a strategy wherein the town would just have to build the units from the ground up. We are currently doing that with Granite Park, and in the past we did that with the Peak One neighborhood. Housing helps is our 5th strategy. in simple terms, that's a buy down program where we purchase a deed restriction on an existing home in Frisco. I do have a separate slide to dive into the details of that one. So ADUs, the town code allows ADUs, and it somewhat incentivizes a homeowner to build an ADU by allowing them to not count it as a unit of density if they deed restrict it at 100% AMI. But it requires a large upfront investment to build that ADU. And even if you don't deed restrict your ADU, the town code does not allow you to short-term rent it. So the town code also allows you to have a lock off. It's also not counted as a unit of density. You can short-term rent it, and it does not require that large initial upfront investment. So when you're comparing those two options side by side, the lock off is hands down the better way to go. Because of that, this particular code provision for the ADUs has not really been successful in creating workforce housing units. At some point in the future, we would like to evaluate that code language and see how we could address that issue. The last strategy on here is the Frisco Housing Locals Program. I do also have a separate slide to talk about that in detail. Basically, it just matches a current property owner with a tenant. I don't want to go into more detail because I don't have a slide on each of these strategies, but I do have 2 slides specifically about Frisco Housing Locals and Housing Helps. So we can talk about what we're recommending for those project or programs. Do you have any questions so far on these strategies? Yes?
Just a comment, the ADU versus lock off explanation was super enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah, it's surprising the number of times we get, why don't people do ADUs? Well,
Right.
you know, so
Yeah, and if the layout of the home already has thought that out, you can just have one and without any effort or money spent. Okay, so let's dive into the Housing Helps program for a minute. So how it works is the town will pay 15% of the market value of the home to purchase a deed restriction for an existing home here in Frisco. There's 5 different ways we can do that. The first one is providing down payment assistance to a prospective home buyer, or we could pay money to an existing homeowner to purchase a deed restriction on their home. Third, we could purchase a home that is currently for sale and put a deed restriction on it and then resell it. The fourth option is to provide money to an existing homeowner to build an ADU. And then the fifth option is to partner with the county. And to clarify, we could partner with the county on any of the above 4 options. So in 2022, Frisco completed 2 Housing Helps purchases, or that was in 2021. Those were both down payment assistance. And in 2022, we've completed 3 purchases. 2 of them were partnering with the county, and one of them was the purchase of 406 South 8th Avenue. If we were to follow the Housing Helps model, we would deed restrict that home and then resell it. However, we do have the opportunity to combine that property with the adjacent property that we're under contract on, hold it and develop it as workforce housing in the future. So in the meantime, we can use that home as a rental unit instead. So the 2022 budget allocated $1,545,000 for Housing Helps purchases. We have almost spent all of that. We spent $1,499,840. Most of that was spent on the purchase of 406 South 8th. And we have just over $45,000 remaining in that budget. Because of that, we were recommending that council consider whether or not you would like to increase the Housing Helps budget for the remainder of the year. So Frisco Housing Locals. This is another strategy we're using right now. It was launched as a pilot program last fall in October. It is currently only available to Town of Frisco employees. The town basically finds the property owners and signs a master lease agreement for a long-term rental. We basically just guarantee that they're going to receive rent, and we guarantee that we'll cover the cost of any damages incurred in the property. So it provides that peace of mind. So far, we've only engaged in 3 of these master lease agreements. We haven't really seen this program reach a high level of success yet, and there are a few reasons why that we're seeing. First is that we're competing with the county. They are paying around $6,800 per bedroom for a similar program. The second reason why we don't think it's super successful yet is because most of the unit mixes that have been offered are 3 and 4 bedrooms. And most of the town employees looking for a rental unit are looking for a 1 or 2 bedroom. And on the lighter side of that, the town of Frisco employees who were looking for housing since October, most of them, I would say, were able to secure a town-owned rental unit. So that would be another reason why this program isn't totally working, since it's only available to town of Frisco employees. The final point I want to make on this program is that the high rent price doesn't really align with the short time frame that unit is available and affordable for the local workforce. So for example, I showed you on the last slide that we've spent around $73,000 on the housing helps purchases per unit. Those units are all available now forever to the local workforce in perpetuity, right? In comparison, we might spend, around 50 grand on a Frisco Housing Locals unit just to make it available for 1 year for somebody. So I know the program was launched with the initial intention of addressing the immediate need. And of course, addressing immediate need comes at a higher cost. So instead of just bagging this program altogether, we're recommending that we expand this out, invite the local businesses, invite the childcare providers, and invite the school district to participate. In that scenario, they would sign the master lease and take on that responsibility of guaranteeing rent and covering the cost of any damages incurred. They would also be responsible for matching tenants with the available units. The town would still facilitate this program. We would still contract with Omni and pay that management fee and kind of act as an intermediary. But that way we could keep this program going, expand it to a wider base of potential tenants who are looking for housing without expending all available resources just to provide temporary housing. All right, so moving on. Oh, I'm sorry.
Would we wait till the end?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so
Yeah.
on that program, a couple of questions. Yeah. Just for clarity's sake, on the Breckenridge program where they're paying 6 something per bedroom, is that a one-time payment to bring that unit or residence into the program?
It was my understanding that they just sign a year lease, so they're paying that for basically a year of availability. Is that your understanding?
I think that's actually a 6-month lease if I'm not mistaken.
Oh.
So that fee is paid directly to the property owner on a per bedroom basis. So it's a 2-bedroom unit. That would actually be double what that number was.
Right.
And that's only available for the year or for the duration of the lease. Then is back to potentially being a short-term rental again.
And if you roll it back in, the town of Breckenridge writes them another check for that 600 per bedroom, essentially every 6 months, as long as they stay in the deal.
I don't know that for certain, but I believe that might be the case. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Right? That sounds expensive to everybody. The other side of that is, I guess let's get out of that and back to us as far as with our programs coming with units that we've only had 3. Are we basing, I think you said this, are we basing the rent on the AMI chart and then supplementing where the AMI chart ends to market rate, and that's what we pay to the property owner?
So the way we executed the only 3 that we've done back in December and January, and then another renewed one of them in this past June. The way it worked is the property owner contacted us and we sent them through Omni through the portal just to see if that's a feasible unit. And so that way we're getting that process dialed in as well. Ultimately, the property owner and the town would essentially negotiate what we felt was an appropriate bedroom or what was appropriate lease dollar on that. And if the property owner said, no, I want $4,000 for this 2-bedroom unit, we said, okay, good luck to you, because that's not the type of unit that we were looking for. When it came to us matching the tenant for the particular unit, we would take a look at the tenant's AMI. And since they're a town employee, we knew exactly what it was going to be, and set the rent that the employee is paying to the town based on the AMI. So that way is affordable for our property owner. Because we don't have a set amount that we're advertising to the public. Frankly, I think we've been able to negotiate much better deals. And so the subsidy on a per unit basis for these short-term leases is much, much lower.
6 months on those.
We were doing 6 months on each of those. Yes.
And then my other question before it leaves
Mhm.
is I need some clarity on, I totally want to invite people into this program. I think that's going to be super helpful, right? But and maybe I don't need to know, but how the heck this works, like it was, this will just say this, the school is responsible for first, last deposit security and stuff. And finding the people to go into the unit, but yet we're contracting with Omni to do all the same things? Correct. That's what.
Essentially, we contract with the Omni back in, I believe it was early December of last year, in order to set up the process to administer this program. And because we were it was a pilot program at the time, how could this actually function? And over the past few months, we've looked at it and said, in this particular case, or you're using your example, the town was the business. We had the client list or the tenant list and of looking for available units. And Omni was there in order to have a place for the property owner to go and process that. Omni executes the leases, so we're not responsible for executing the master lease with the property owner, doing any of that follow-up or anything else. We, as the town, collect the rent directly from the tenant that's in the unit. So in the case of, let's say, I don't know, we'll use Walmart. Let's say Walmart wanted to participate, big business, right? So let's say Walmart wanted to participate in this program. They would sign up through the portal with Omni and say, we would love to participate in this project. We have a tenant list of this. We're looking for this sort of unit, see what they can do and try to match that up. We would be completely out of it because we've already done our part by contracting with Omni, advertising this program out to the business community and hopefully to local property owners so that they're aware of the program. But then Walmart would contract with Walmart would enter into a master lease with the property owner facilitated by Omni. Walmart would pay Omni the master lease, the full 6-month master lease, the financial, the security deposit, and then they would collect rent from the tenants. And again, town's completely out of it. We're just advertising, facilitating with Omni on this.
Cool, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so we'll move on to the current workforce housing projects that we have in the pipeline right now. There are 5 of them. 4 of them are specifically Frisco projects. 1 of them is a county project. Start with Granite Park here, which we know will provide 22 deed restricted rental units at 100% AMI or less. We're partnering with CDOT on this one. We're hoping to award the CMGC contract at the next town council meeting on August 9th. And then we would potentially break ground on this project in the fall of this year, or maybe in the spring of next year, so that we can hopefully complete it by the end of 2024 or at the latest early 2025. 602 Galena is the next project. That's the Colorado Workforce Center. The state owns that parcel. It's 0.72 acre. They are willing to sell it to us for $3 million. And there was an IGA on tonight's agenda. It got moved to the next town council meeting. If approved, the county would contribute $1.5 million towards the purchase of that property. Both that IGA and the purchase agreement would have to be approved by town council before we could close on the property, and we're tentatively scheduled to close in September. After that, we could begin the design and then followed by the construction. We do think the property would be able to have about 30 to 40 workforce housing units, in addition to some office space for the workforce center employees and potentially even some space for a childcare facility. The next project is 810 Pitkin. It should also say and 406 South 8th, but that was too much for that little circle. So together, those two properties combined along with the two town-owned rights of way would be around 3/4 of an acre of developable land. That we would be able to build approximately 12 units. That's what the zoning would allow for right now. If we were to have a workforce housing overlay zone in place before going through planning approval, then we could potentially see about maximizing the density of that site. The workforce housing overlay zone would also be beneficial to every project on this screen, actually, but also 275 Granite, which is known as the Sabatini lot. The town currently owns that lot. It's just less than half an acre. The zoning allows for 8 units. And we do have an opportunity to combine that lot with the neighboring lot and develop it as workforce housing. That would allow us to have just about an acre of land and really maximize the density and unit mixes on that property. The last project is Lake Hill. That is a county project. Everyone's up to speed on that one, so I won't go into the details there. But now I've basically finished describing all of our, sorry, go ahead.
I do have a question. Why do you even include Lake Hill?
Just because we want to keep it in our sites in case we have that potential opportunity in the future, then we would need to include it in our budget at that point. So we want to keep it there saying, okay, this is a placeholder. This might be an upcoming opportunity so that we have
It
room
just
for it.
Feel strongly that we have made our desire for that known, and it has been rebuffed.
Yeah,
We are available to provide the water. It's been rebuffed. So, yeah, as a 44-acre site outside of our jurisdiction, what precludes it from being developed? Water, sewer for $75 million that they don't have. So if you're going to list Lake Hill, I think it needs to be the messaging every time Lake Hill is listed is that we would like to do it. But
Right.
it's been rebuffed. So to list it here as water and sewer is needed, no, we've offered it. It's not our project. There's projects all over the county and other jurisdictions that will impact Frisco and will help our workforce problem that we don't control. We don't control Lake Hill,
right.
and that was made very clear to us. So I just think it should be removed as a Frisco project because it's not a Frisco project.
Yeah, it's not a Frisco project. The only reason I included it was the potential opportunity to partner in the future. So I can definitely take it off.
Partner on anything, anywhere. Just have to have somebody to dance with. And they don't want to dance, so. That's, like I said, I don't think it belongs in our pipeline because we don't control it.
Yeah, okay, understood. So yeah, quickly, I just want to show you how we would take all of these projects and existing strategies to achieve our goal of creating 306 deed restricted units by 2027, just what that path would look like here. So last fall, we had exactly 153 deed restricted properties. In March, when Leslie and Don presented, they proposed that we shoot for around 10 housing helps purchases and 5 density bonus units per year. So I've added those to each year here. In addition to that, we are anticipating 22 units from Granite Park in 2024, another 40 units from the 602 Galena project after that, potentially 12 units from 810 Pitkin, and another 8 to 16 units from 275 Granite Street. So if we were to complete those 4 projects by 2027 and achieve the 10 housing helps purchases and 5 density bonus units per year, then we would actually exceed our goal of 306 deed restricted units. So far for 2022, we have not met the 10 housing helps and 5 density bonus units. We've only completed 3 housing helps purchases and 2 density bonus units this year. And actually there's an error on that slide. It should say 2 density bonus units there. I bumped both of those numbers down. The math is correct, but that one number is off under the gray 2022 year for density bonus. It should say 2. So I just bumped those down to reflect reality. And as you can see, the road to success for achieving 306 units by 2027 is heavily dependent on 3 strategies, which are new construction, density bonus, and housing helps. So if council feels that our existing strategies aren't sufficient to meet our goals, then there are some other potential strategies that we could consider going forward. This is something to just keep in mind. This is food for thought. Now, we're not necessarily recommending that we jump right on these strategies, and we're not really looking for a thumbs up or a thumbs down on these strategies right now. Yes?
Before we dive into those.
Yeah.
I just wanted to come back to the housing Frisco. I think I said that right. Let's just say I own, I don't know, a bookstore. And I wanted to enter into the program. I, as the business, are going to contact Omni, say I'm in, this is my deal. If I heard you correctly, I've got 2 employees that need housing. I'm going to pay their rent up front for 6 months in addition to fees from Omni. And where I'm going with this is we've offered housing options to businesses in the past, and it's been cost prohibitive. That's what I'm getting at.
And so that's the way that we would propose it based on our current experience and our current deal with Omni. If council wants us to look at a different direction of matching or doing a cost match or something like that with the business, or we put it up so that the business isn't putting it all up front, but paying the town back. Certainly there's other options that we could explore on that. Just the way it's been set up thus far based on the town of Frisco's experience and what we would recommend at this point, knowing what we know, is that, again, the business would be upfront for all those costs, except for the administrative fee. The town would still cover the administrative fee, which is about 6% of that master lease value.
So throwing it out there, right? We've been down that road before, and it just, for the numbers didn't work for folks, right? So we've had to, Mary Ruth is our example. So then we pivoted and kept them all for us, and then opened it up to the greater geographical area, made it work because the businesses just flat out couldn't buy them. Okay, so then lastly on this particular interruption is Andy, thanks for bringing up Lake Hill and your point. I agree with you. Totally agree with you. We can just carve it out and leave it on the side, right? So should, if and when it come back to us, we're ready to go. That's, I think, what you guys were trying to do here. Totally get it. And this report is awesome. The one in the packet, I really want access to your PowerPoints. Yeah, yeah, really. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're proprietary. Yeah, right.
Sorry.
So I have
I'm done.
sympathy for you as the bookstore owner. I'm curious, first of all, like whose rule that is that Omni? Or is that the town, like who decided that it had to be paid all up front?
That was just the program that we laid out to town council back in, I want to say like September of last year, where we first started exploring this. We said, well, this is the way that we're going to go ahead and operate this, and we're going to go ahead and pay it up front and whatever else. There may be a situation where the bookstore owner could pay that monthly rent on a monthly basis. But that's not what the town did. Certainly there might be a possibility if we wanted to look at that and explore that with Omni a little bit further.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of cuts out the smaller businesses and it's gonna be great for the hospital and the schools and
Mhm.
Walmart. But yeah, maybe not so accessible to the smaller businesses.
So yeah,
Okay.
we could certainly explore that with Omni a little bit further before we roll it out.
That's great feedback. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. So as I was mentioning, these strategies are, we're not really looking for you to say, yes, move forward with these, or no, don't move forward with these right now. These are just some ideas that have been tossed out there at various different meetings. So we wanted to provide kind of a quick snapshot for you here. And I'll just kind of define each one of these. We'll start with the housing overlay. The housing overlay zone incentivizes private developers to build workforce housing on their own. So incentives such as increased density, decreased setbacks, maybe parking reductions, et cetera. There could be many more, would help lower development costs and motivate private developers to build workforce housing. One of the great things about this strategy is that it requires zero subsidies from the town. We have already received direction from council to move forward with this strategy. So, I wavered between, do I put this on existing or potential? But we haven't made any ground on actually drafting it because we've been really busy, coming back to you every couple of weeks with all of these various different topics. So we are working on it, and we are recommending that council direct staff to prioritize this particular strategy because we're super excited about it. And as I mentioned it earlier, all of the projects in our pipeline would benefit from this strategy. And if we want to set ourselves up for success, we could start drafting this now and really prioritize it, take the time to do it so that we can get this done in preparation for those other projects that are ready to come online in the coming years here. The next step, let's talk about inclusionary zoning. I'm going to kind of jump around on this screen. In contrast to the housing overlay zone, which incentivizes and encourages the developer to build workforce housing, inclusionary zoning typically mandates it. So as an example, an IZ regulation would require that a specific portion or specific percentage of new development be deed restricted at a specific AMI, either for rent or for sale. Then the remainder of the development could be market rate units. That's something that would have to be implemented through the zoning code. Yep.
Do we not have, at this point, is it not like 6 units, if you're building 6 units, you have to do one?
No, the only place that any requirement is included is in the cabin housing requirement, which is a voluntary thing that property owner could do. So that is the only place in our entire development code. And I believe it's any more than 5 requires at least 1. But there's no other inclusionary zoning requirement anywhere in the town code.
So for instance, the new building that's going up on South.
Mhm.
This would require them to have. And it doesn't state
Mm.
what the proportions are, but let's say at least 1 unit.
Potentially. Yeah, and again, since the rules haven't been written, it could be whatever the town council directs staff to draft up. It could be AMI limited. It might not have to be. It could just be a work requirement only. There are a lot of places that have done these in various forms or another. Prior discussions with town council over the past year or so, there have not been a lot of interest from town council in pursuing this, so we haven't gone any further.
Callie, can I just quickly, I don't know where somehow we got somebody's Hulu going on over there. Just on one, oddly enough. We've been watching Lord of the Rings. Sorry, what presentation are we?
That's a good question, honestly.
Yeah. I don't know how that.
Is it Shark Week now? I didn't know.
That's exciting.
Shark
I had no idea it was Shark Week.
That's a proclamation that comes later.
Yeah.
On-
Did you have a?
I just wanted to note that on inclusionary zoning, if council wants to have that discussion, it is significantly more than a policy discussion.
Mhm.
It's a legal discussion as well. 2 times now within recent years, the most recent being 2019, the United States Supreme Court took a pass, denied cert review on legal challenges to inclusionary zoning ordinances on grounds that they constituted takings. I think they took a pass because they didn't have the case that imposed enough of a requirement to deprive an owner of all economically viable use of the property. That is the standard for a regulatory taking. The last one that came up was out of California. It was a requirement for subdivision approval as a condition that you either create affordable housing unit or you pay a $40,000 fee in lieu. I don't think anybody had the idea or impression that a $40,000 fee was going to break anybody or make projects economically unviable on a piece of property. Having said that, you've recently received quite a bit of information from the developers or potential developers across the street about what they believe to be the economic viability of building affordable housing units on an incentive basis. And if you're to believe them, they're correct, both of which are, open to discussion. According to them, right, were this to be imposed as a mandatory requirement, they wouldn't be building the unit because they would lose money. So there, right, the proof is in the pudding, right? The inclusionary zoning is probably just fine right up to the point where it's not, because you've taken somebody's property by imposing the requirement on them. So just understand in the back of the mind, there are a lot more than policy issues involved with inclusionary zoning. One of these years, the Supreme Court is going to take up the case and tell us what that limit is when it finds the right one come up. But so far, not so good. Just so you know, sorry.
Yeah, no, well said. That I was trying to keep this super high level, but those details are really important if you're looking at something like that. Okay, so commercial linkage, that's kind of along the same lines, but it's basically just an impact fee that would be paid to the town by the developer to offset the need for affordable housing units that would be generated by new commercial development. So the money that you're collecting from that impact fee would then be used toward development of workforce housing in the town. Or if the developer doesn't want to pay the fee, then they could opt to build it on their own, an equivalent amount. So let's say typically it's assessed on a per square foot basis. If the per square foot fee is $5 and they're building 20,000 square feet of commercial space, they would pay $100,000 commercial linkage fee, or develop an equivalent amount somewhere else. You can't develop any amount of housing for 100,000 around here. So they have to pay the fee in that case. Adaptive reuse, let's talk about that next. This just involves repurposing vacant or underutilized commercial spaces as workforce housing. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the entire commercial building would be transformed into residential. Could potentially just be a portion of that building. Let's say it's a 4-story commercial building and it's all being utilized as commercial space currently, but realizing, maybe the property owner realizes that it's vacant or underutilized and they're not really taking advantage of the full potential of the building. In that case, you could potentially, maintain, let's say the ground floor is commercial and use some of the upper floors as residential, or really define how you want that building to look. But in order to make that a successful strategy, it would have to be paired with some type of zoning reform, such as the housing overlay zone district. You'll hear me refer back to that several times. But the zoning reform would just allow flexibility in the allowable uses on the site and also provide a framework for the allowed density. So prefabricated ADUs is another idea that we've been kind of discussing internally. As I was talking about earlier, it just takes a lot of time and money to build an accessory dwelling unit. And I think there are some homeowners out there who would really like to collect that rent from the ADU. They don't necessarily want to take the effort to go out there and get the architectural drawings and hire a GC to build the unit. So the idea is that if the town were to commission this work instead, and then turn around and sell the ADUs to the homeowners with a deed restriction, then, perhaps more property owners would opt into that. And really the great thing about ADUs is that they don't require any additional land, right? We kind of have a land problem. There's not much available in Summit County. So that's what makes ADUs such a great strategy. New housing concepts is basically just that, sometimes the traditional housing is not what everyone is looking for, depending on your phase of life or whatever it may be. Sometimes the dormitory style units with shared living spaces or even the tiny homes may be more appropriate for various housing needs. That would also take some sort of revisions in the code if we wanted to move forward with allowing that type of strategy to be successful. And then finally, the last strategy on here is long-range planning. We are recommending that we wait until the 2023 housing needs assessment is published. Summit Combined Housing Authority is currently working on that process. They anticipate publishing that data in 2023. Once we have that data, then we are recommending at that point to think about embarking on a long-range housing planning process. So that would just provide a roadmap for where the town is headed with housing over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. And it would consider all of the strategies, all of our existing strategies, all of the potential strategies I mentioned and more. And it would basically vet each one for Frisco's unique needs and then match funds with those specific solutions so that we could move forward in a strategic direction. It's really one thing to throw a bunch of ideas at you in a work session like I'm doing right now. Is quite another thing to go through that long range planning process, really take the time to research and evaluate each option, go through the public process of gaining input and buy-in, and then, formally evaluating and adopting your plan. Are there any questions about the potential strategies?
Want to know any of our input on any of this at this point?
Feedback is always welcome. Like I said, we're not looking for any decisions on these, so I'm happy to hear your thoughts on it.
So I just have a couple things,
Sure.
and then actually kind of an overall question, right?
Okay.
The housing overlay zone, for sure. I feel like we've all been working on this for a long time, and it seems to be the way forward. Prefab ADUs could work, and so could adaptive reuse. That's up for whatever for the future. I think we should be working on long range planning already, so it's not as long. And new housing concepts are, should be on the table for sure, because that's just the way of the world. I'm personally not necessarily in for inclusionary zoning. But with that, one of the slides you showed earlier was 348 units by 2027. Everybody talks about we're not going to build our way out of this crisis, right? Like, what if we could? What would be the right number to build our way out of this crisis? Do we need 1,000 units in town that would be workforce housing? And like, do we see the need for that? Or do we think like this actually could suffice, or we need a couple thousand units? I have no idea, right? And I'd be interested to know your point of view there.
Yeah, the last needs assessment update was done in 2020 and published in March of 2020, right when COVID hit. And since then, the demography of Summit County has changed drastically.
Yeah.
So we really need that update, and that will be published in 2023, and that will provide the answer to your question. I'm dying to know too.
Yeah, okay.
That's kind of what we all need. In the meantime, we still want to move forward. We still know that there's a huge housing need out there. So why not continue along our path of trying to make a difference here, right?
Yeah.
And
Like
I
you
think,
should. Like that,
yeah,
but it's great. It's all great. We've needed all of this for so long. So we appreciate that.
thanks. Well, and going back to your comment about the 306 units, I think we're reaching for a number that's attainable, but not too attainable that it's so easy to, well, we'll do that tomorrow, It's like you got to make goals and set goals for ourselves that we can reach, but it's gonna take effort, and it's realistic.
That's good. Thanks.
Okay, so quick housing update for you. So the 2022 adopted budget references the SCHA 5A fund, and that's what I'm referring to here.
I'm
on
just
the
trying,
slide.
sorry, guys.
Oh, it's okay. So when you're looking at this chart on your screen, just know that all of the negative numbers are demarcated with parentheses. Anything that doesn't have parentheses are positive numbers. And as you know, the town does have specific funding sources dedicated to workforce housing. So for 2022, we had originally budgeted about $1.6 million in revenue for that specific housing fund. We think, well, so far we've collected around 656,000, and we think we'll actually be collecting more like $2.2 million with the addition of the excise tax. So the next line item is operating expenses. That covers salaries, benefits, administrative fees, and miscellaneous costs. We had budgeted just over 200,000. We think we'll spend just under that. Next is housing helps. We budgeted $1,545,000. We've almost expended all of that. And we already talked about that. So we're recommending looking at increasing that budget. Then we don't have anything budgeted for 275 Granite for this year. Granite Park has $5 million allocated, but we think we'll spend more like 1.1 million within this year. And then we have a couple of unbudgeted line items here. We have 810 Pitkin Street, which we will be spending 1.6 million on Friday to close on that property. And if council approves the purchase of 602 Galena Street, then we will also spend $3 million on that purchase and then receive 1.5 million in reimbursement from the county. So the general idea, the key takeaway of this slide is that our expenditures are greater than our revenue. The only reason we're able to make this work right now is because we started with a beginning spendable fund balance of $7 million. If we continue along this pattern of spending, we are going to run out of money very soon. Because of that, we're making several recommendations. The first 4 recommendations here on the screen are budget related. The remaining 3 recommendations are strategy related. So first, we're recommending that council review financing options for Granite Park so that we're not paying for that entire project with cash. This is tentatively scheduled on the town council agenda for late August or early September. I mentioned earlier that there was an IGA on tonight's agenda. It got moved. That was for the purchase of 602 Galena for $3 million. And hopefully that IGA will be on your agenda in 2 weeks from now. But as a result of that, we are recommending including a budget amendment for $1.5 million as a partner contribution from the county, as well as a $3 million supplemental appropriation for the 602 Galena purchase. These 2 items are scheduled on the August 9th town council agenda as the first reading of an ordinance. If council is interested in increasing the 2022 housing helps budget, we could also include that in that same ordinance in 2 weeks from now. The last 3 recommendations are to expand Frisco Housing Locals to the local businesses, etc. Direct staff to prioritize workforce housing, the workforce housing overlay zone, and look at starting a long-range housing plan after the needs assessment is published next year. These are our recommendations. Instead of concluding my presentation with a list of questions for everyone, we were hoping you could run through and simply give us a thumbs up, thumbs down on each of these items.
That's great. Let's do it.
Sounds like thumbs up on all. Done.
That would be the easiest. For any other questions, comments, anything else before we go through this list? I know Andy's got his list.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, jump in and then we'll go through the
And these questions
thumbs up,
are
thumbs
shared,
down.
you
Yeah.
know, I assume they got to you. Okay, so hopefully, because one is just framing the conversation of what % of our units are occupied by Frisco employees?
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that. When we do deed monitoring in September, we will collect that data. At this point, I don't know the answer to that.
I would view that as important. Add that. I did love that we're maintaining our capital plan. We had the original thought and continue to allow it to evolve. You had it was option 2 versus option 5. They seem to be the same thing, with the fundamental difference being one of them we pay all of, and the other one we share the process with the county.
Correct.
I pick 5. Is there a difference? Is there a reason we wouldn't, in any scenario, pursue option 5 before we pursue option 2?
So, and that's a good question. When we had amended Housing Helps back in March, I believe it was specifically so we could use the county's deed restriction. And one of the differences between the county and the town deed restriction, at least as it relates to Housing Helps, the town deed restriction restricts that units for occupancy by a Frisco, somebody that works in Frisco. The county deed restriction expands that and allows outside of town of Frisco workers. And that's why the county's willing to pay half. So if council directs that, hey, you know what, we don't want to necessarily hold on to that Frisco priority, then we certainly could pursue the county partnership as the first option. But so far, we've only used that as kind of the last resort. If the property owner has said, you know what, I've got a county tenant or a tenant that's employed in Breckenridge, I still want to do this program. So that's when we enter in a partnership with the county. And that was the reason we did that amendment back in March.
And I thought that was why you proposed basically opening our program that isn't working to the whole county. Well, if we do that, then it seems relatively obvious
Mhm.
that not only are we opening our program to the community as opposed to just Frisco,
Mhm.
but we're going to kind of move it over to them as well, because that's what we already have. Why would, otherwise it's duplicative, right?
Maybe I didn't quite hear I don't know that we'd be moving our program or having them administer our program if I heard you wrong there.
I thought that's what happens already. If we have a Frisco property
Mhm.
that the landlord and the tenant works outside of Frisco. So there's gonna be participation from the county. Who's running the program? So us or the county?
It's our program because it's the Frisco Housing Helps program. The people come to Frisco because that's where we do this in collaboration with the other jurisdictions, the SEHA. The SEHA actually has set up the website where people apply for Housing Helps, and then SEHA sends them over to, if it's in Frisco, they send it to Frisco. If it's in Breckenridge, they send it to Breckenridge to look at. In this particular case, and again, it's if council wants to change the priority, I feel like the direction was back in March that yes, expand the program to make it available for these situations, but we still want to keep that Frisco priority on these deed restricted units when we're expending 5A funds. So if there's a direction change there, we certainly can implement that. As far as once the deed restriction is put on, since in the case of the 2 units this year, it's a county deed restriction. The county is now responsible for deed monitoring and enforcement of that deed restriction rather than a town, which is again slightly less work for us, which great. Each of the towns and the county contract essentially with SEHA to do the initial round of deed restriction monitoring on an annual basis, and then the towns actually do any enforcement when it's necessary. So everybody has their own program when it gets to that level.
Can I follow up on that? Sure. This all started at the housing authority, right? And the program wasn't being utilized or successful just in some capacity, right? It was Housing Helps. It was with the housing authority. It was when you were with your former employer and it didn't get any legs and wasn't going anywhere. And then it went to FERC, and then from FERC, it's evolved over to where it is with Tom. And what I'm getting at is at some point, do we take the 6 different housing helps programs and bring it back to the housing authority and we all put 5A money into it and have them just do it?
Yeah, and certainly, and that could be a conversation with the housing authority. To clarify, I think you might have mixed a couple of programs or the housing. What FERC was doing was what they called it Housing Works. There's a lot of housing, locals, helps, works, whatever else. The Housing Works more or less evolved to the landing locals that Breckenridge and Summit County are doing, and Summit, the SCHA isn't involved in it at all anymore. So there's been some evolution of these programs, and the names are too similar, so we mix them up a little bit. I think there certainly could be that greater conversation with SCHA on as they evolve. I think as part of their overall longer range planning, with Rob now as the executive director, he's got some good plans. They're developing their real estate arm of the housing authority. So they're evolving as well. They certainly could evolve to implement and manage a number of these projects for whether it's Dillon, Silverthorne, all of us, whatever, over time. They're not there yet, but I think that's certainly a conversation to have it in front of the SCHA and have them keep on thinking about what is their future.
Sorry to keep going. So, you know, and moving to our rental units, the 18 units that the town owns, you know, it's no secret. My view is if government's in business, it needs to act like business. So I'm curious, we have 18 units, gross rents of $78,000, net rent of $54,000. The numbers are just crazy low, meaning if at $78,000 in gross rent, with 51 occupancy spots, that's $305 per month per occupant.
Not all of the units have been occupied. Two of them have been, one of them we just recently purchased and it has never been occupied. The other one is town manager's unit, which hasn't been occupied for quite some time. Some of the other ones were vacant here and there. And the rent prices are all based on that AMI chart. So for seasonals, the rent prices are pretty low.
Are we maximizing the occupancy? Meaning
if we would, to the extent that we have the control over it, yes. For example, the 10 Mile Basin units, whoever wins that lottery drawing gets to sign a lease. So they may bring a whole family or it may just be them. You know, we can't really control how many people are going into that unit in that case.
And I don't want to micromanage. I want to pursue the running these things like businesses of maximum occupancy. You know, when I say maximum revenue relative to what they're designed to do, you know, which is fill them with the number of people they're intended to be and have the rents collected at that rate. That's important. And I do also 54,000, which was listed as the net revenue, seemed to have just subtracted out our management costs. I would love at some point, not today, to see the report that we are actually running this like a business. And when we have maintenance obligations and we have HOA fees,
Right.
basically we look at this and say, are we making any money at this? Because if we're not, we can deed restrict them and sell them and accomplish the same thing without the ongoing revenue expenses. So I think that's an analysis we should.
Yeah,
Oh.
absolutely. The analysis would be very important. We do include those numbers in the 10-year housing pro forma. I only gave you a PDF of the main tab, but that is an Excel document that has a bunch of different tabs. One of the tabs is, or actually multiple tabs, is for the rental units. And we do include HOA fees, maintenance fees, et cetera, for each of those units in that Excel spreadsheet. I just didn't talk about it in the staff report. So yeah, I apologize for omitting those details. I understand what you're saying, and that's,
When you know, and again, it's just the only thing I know is what is presented to me.
Right.
And when it says our net revenue is $54,000 and we have however many millions of dollars worth of asset, our return is non-existent. That's less than 1% if they're $300,000 units. So we just need to. We've done we meaning you have done a great job of moving these out of, you know, before you got here. all of these units were internally managed. So I think we've
Right.
done a great job, step one, of getting them managed by an outside organization, which takes the burden off of our internal staff. And we just need to keep moving that business-oriented process forward.
If I could interrupt and add just a little bit to that, if you don't mind. One of the, some of the, we're not going to see revenue benefits on on our employee units. What we are going to see is we actually have people in some of these positions. Without some of these employee units, which granted, if we're compared to the general market, we're way undercharging on these. But we wouldn't have staff that are managing Fun Club. We wouldn't have staff at the marina and a number of other places. So it is, I definitely get the idea of trying to manage this in a very revenue positive. And that's what we're definitely trying to do while breaking it out, knowing what our expenses are. But we're never going to break even on these units. We're never going to make money on these units. It's a different purpose on them.
But we should know if we're paying a $20 an hour, if we're giving a $20 an hour employee a $700 a month housing allowance. That's part of the analysis. I'm
Mhm.
not saying it's right or wrong. It doesn't impact anything other than that's important information that we're analyzing of what's it costing us to run Fun Club? Is that $700, if that's the number, I'm making that number up, but is that $700 number allocated to a cost to Fun Club because we're providing a housing subsidy to an employee?
There's also benefits per, like when everybody talks about it should be even, equal benefits and all, then ends up that a few particular employees get a much greater benefit than anyone else.
I see it totally differently. I see this as the same as running the museum. It's never going to make us money. It's not the intent. It's part of our community character and our culture to have workforce living within our community and to try to run it as a business that will never work. And we're filling the gap that the market won't do because there is no money for it. So without us stepping in, we would have no rental units.
But
And
running
so-
it like a business means, like any of our individual businesses that go out and buy units, they factor that into their business analysis. Is
But
it
you're
worth it
talking
to-
about returns. We're never going to get a return. 1% return. We shouldn't even look at this as getting a return. We're getting a return on human capital and community culture. We should sell them all if we're not looking at it that
Well,
way.
no, because we're analyzing the whole thing. Is this a critical element of Fun Club? Great, then that's part of the analysis.
But I don't think we can parse it down because if it goes to any business owner in town, that's benefiting the entire community and the town. So if any of
You
these,
should be able to place a value on that too.
I think the numbers are important, but I think to look at it as a business or expect returns or expect it to be as close to a zero net balance, it's never going to happen. And that's not the reason we should be in this program. We're doing it because the gap we know is in the rental market, especially at the lower MI. No one's doing that because there's no money for it. That's why government had to step in. So that's why we're running this program, and to know what it costs us is important. But I think each time an employee moves to try to pin the cost of that unit to that department's budget, doesn't seem like it. Yes, we can find that information, but is it going to change how we operate that unit or look at that employee? No, it's a person who has a house who's contributing to our community. And to me, that's what's most important about all of these things. I think knowing what it costs to run those units for sure.
Yeah.
But not down to the minute detail of who's living in there and what department are they in and what's that then subsidy towards that department. Because then I think Janelle's going to need 5 other people to track.
We're moving forward
Yep.
in the collection of the information.
Yep.
And the more
And
we
that
have,
information is great. I'm definitely there.
The density bonus we talked about, Lake Hill we talked about, potential strategies. It sounded like you said you kind of have presented them, but we're not addressing them tonight. Right, okay. I'm good. Great report. Thank you. We're getting smarter every time.
That's for sure. Other comments, questions, thoughts?
A question, and Andy may run with this from the comment side of things, but my question is, how many of deed restrictions within the town of Frisco that we've created are tied to a appreciation cap. Do we know that number?
I don't know that number offhand. That's actually on my list of things to do. Is run a full inventory of all deed restrictions and have kind of like a Excel spreadsheet showing the specifics of each one, the AMI, the specific appreciation number. All of those things that are in there. I would like to track, but I don't have that information at my fingertips currently.
Yeah.
I'm just, I'm in favor of that as well, you know, if we have a few particular units in these few particular places that are not performing as they were designed, right, then we should take a look at how we can assist these owners to at least keep up with market rate, not market rate, but you know, the economy is what it is. So I'm in favor of that. You know, I am in favor of the list and how you have it, but the, you know, 3 million supplemental appropriation for 602 Galena, why wouldn't we finance that?
So, yeah, and I can answer that. So, upcoming on consecutive agendas for 602 Galena, we've got a couple of items. The first one is an IGA with Summit County, who was our initial partner and collaborator with this potential project, where the town would be the purchaser from the state of this property for $3 million, which is their appraised value. And the county would contribute 1.5 million of that in revenue at property closing, which is set to occur right now, probably sometime in mid-September. So that's why there's two line items on that, one for the revenue side, 1.5, and one for 3 million, which is the purchase. We would only be 1.5 of that. We can't finance it immediately because we don't actually have a financing mechanism in place. So the next item would be Leslie Edwards, our finance director, will be presenting on August 23rd, what's called a reimbursement resolution. You may recall we did one of these back in, I believe, March for 619 Granite. That would allow the purchase that's being spent now to be rolled into and made part of the future financing of the project, should council decide to finance that at some point in the future. I probably butchered the technical aspects of that, but that's why I have my job and Leslie has hers. So, and then the third item would be in September, we'll do or town council, we bring it to town council for a resolution to enter into a contract for a purchase and sale agreement with the state of Colorado Department of Division of Labor and Employment for actual purchase of that property. And there's going to be conditions with that as far as what will be incorporated into the development. So that's the meat of what we're working on right now. And that's how it lays out.
Okay, that's great.
And some of it was timeliness to get it done for our benefit and with working with the state and everything they've got going. So,
Right.
yeah.
But as long as we have, you know, future potential to, you know, use other people's money, then we should be doing that for this purpose.
Leverage. Yep. Leverage.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we should increase the housing helps budget. I think we should also increase the, you know, at least a 10-mile basin. If it's not just Frisco only. I think if it was a program that worked in conjunction with Summit County and all, and we just sort of handed it to them and it made it easier for you guys, that would probably suffice. Yeah, I think the rest of, I'm all for it.
Andy, were you a thumbs up on that whole list?
Financing, yes. Budget, yes. I do remember saying, by the way, back when we started the housing helps, I can't wait till you guys blow the budget and come back to us for more.
It's true.
So good job. Here we are. So, yeah. I don't know where it falls in, but I do also, last time we talked about, it might be not on these, I apologize, is the density bonuses, being able to utilize properties outside of Frisco. And that was why I really think it's an important question of how much of our deed restricted housing is utilized by people working in Frisco versus out of Frisco, because if we're going to expand density bonuses, there's no reason to mandate them being in Frisco if the people that we're benefiting are actually working out of Frisco, because then their work, live places could be where they actually are and not forced to live here.
Yeah, and so the density bonus incentive, we are taking that to planning commission in September, and then we'll be back to council with planning commission's input and then some proposed language on that code provision.
Is that
So-
concept on the table to be discussed?
Is on the table for planning commission to discuss, give input on, and then we'll be back to council with that. With a formal ordinance on that. So that we kind of left out of today's presentation just because it's happening as a different conversation.
Were you guys on the? All good?
Yeah, the only thing, like what I said before, I'd like to see the local businesses not have to pay that whole 6 months at one time,
Or 12.
or
Yeah.
12, yeah.
Okay, we'll certainly add that to our discussions with Omni on how we could implement that further.
I like the list you guys is all good on all of them, and I agree with prioritizing the overlay district. But right behind that is, I'm transitioning my focus now to mostly to get this rental program going, because we've been responsive. It's given us the ability to be forward looking with input from our partners in the building community of what they need to make things successful. I think we've made a lot of strides in that direction. If we get that overlay district in there. But again, it all starts with folks moving to town and working at the lower wage jobs. They're going to need that rental assistance to get them in our community.
As for this list, yep, you've got my full support. I like it. And the overlay district, yeah, full steam ahead on that. I think let's figure out what that can look like. I'd also say, I think as kind of the direction for future conversations, I know inclusionary zoning with that caveat that there's issues there. I still think we need to think about it and see what our options are. Within one block of my house, there's been 11 long-term workforce units that have now been sold, scrapped, and none of the proposed redevelopment have a single workforce unit in it. And unless we do something, that will be our future, because it's now. So that concerns me, and I don't know if that's the right way, but I'd like just to see what those options are, knowing the constraints of takings and not go down that path by any means.
If I could just
Yep.
say, look, maybe without an AMI
Mhm.
attachment to it, so that it's,
Yep.
or I don't know,
Feasible.
whoever, like, we could get some vets to live sharing work here, like something, yeah. I agree.
And then I would just add, I think we'll figure out how to have this in the conversation. I know it just adds more to it, but I think it goes along with what Rick and Andy mentioned, and it was also in a Councilmember Burley emailed me, and I think it is finding out how many of those deed restrictions have that 3% cap and what it might look like. In full transparency, I'm not a big fan of that conversation, but there's enough interest. I think we need to have it and make that see what options are out there to try to keep that continuum of people having a place to start, but a place to go to and not be priced out. So I think that's what we need to do. I think to name it, Peak One is the neighborhood is the prime example of where it's not being quite as successful. So maybe there is something we can do in that world.
And we should recognize we are basically spending everything that we've got at this point. We need to consider how we're funding the rest of our housing beyond everything that we've got going here.
Leslie gets back, she's got a plan.
Great.
Riding her bike across Iowa. Anything else on housing? Danelle, again, thank you. Phenomenal staff report and PowerPoint.
Thank you.
I know more about this in the last few meetings than I think I ever thought we would. So I really appreciate where we're going and all the work you and Don and Tina put into it.
Great, thank you very much for your feedback, and I will email the PowerPoint out to everyone so you can have that.
Big trademark.
And start it back on to see if I can fix
Okay.
that, so.
See if nothing else, we can just unplug it.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I think like. Looks really good. Does it really? Yeah. Really got next. Anyway. I got guy next to me. And, you know, it was so I could hear it. I know you're. That's talking. Hey, you know, everybody likes, when I was around. Remember, you tell us. Sure, questions? Over there. You might hear our names.
And they have fuels questions and.
You guys all. There. Yep. Means I have to talk less. They get to talk more.
Maybe the badges scared everybody away. Pete, we'll get you a badge, I promise. Just so you don't feel left out. No, I. Appreciation cap, I like. I'm interested.
Hold their color and honor of you guys.
There we go. Like it.
There's other ways.
Just remember to hear it well. We need into the mics. Thank you.
No, I got a couple of, I got two that I need to hear. Yeah, they're not great, but they're at least two. Well, the situation right now isn't great either. Oh, gosh, no. Gosh, no. Yes.
Answers. So this is why they have the.
One. That was so weird that.
Good. Yeah, it was yesterday. Just getting responded to. Really and truly.
Did you ever get like Philadelphia, New York City or somewhere? You bought like an off the shelf TV and plugged it in and there was some
Yeah.
wiring glitch. Yeah, seeing that was same message. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
It'd be on when he was watching, they try to like triangulate. And then he doesn't turn off his TV and it go off and it took him like 2 months to figure it out. And finally like stormed his apartment. And he was like, yeah.
On that smiling over there, those little cheese.
I don't think so well. Me.
I'll get 'em, I'll get 'em, but I'm over there cheating right now.
Oh, that's so cute.
That's.
How many did you get? Just the one? You got 200 pictures right now? I can't wait till we got it.
All soccer machines.
As long as we got also a live camera so they can see us.
All they
Hour
see,
three of Public comment.
all they see is the screen, but they hear us.
Hook her up and she's dropping.
It sounds like we got everybody back. All right. Next item on this afternoon's work session agenda is an update on the U.S. Forest Service proposal for resource management and the NEPA review for what we are referring to as the Frisco's backyard. Susan, welcome. It is all yours.
So we're bringing this information to you guys this evening to bring everybody up to speed and give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have of our consultant and of our Forest Service team here. I just wanted to remind everybody where the desire for this project came from. And so the origin stems from just a longstanding community desire and interest in protecting the resources that we have in our backyard area. The recreational amenities back there are amazing, and it's a huge value to our community that we preserve and protect that area. And then also just the heightened awareness and concern for hazardous fuels mitigation in the backyard area is so important. And so back in March, Town Council approved a contract with SE Group to move forward with this project. They are creating a proposal on behalf of the town to the U.S. Forest Service for recreation enhancements and fuel mitigation in the backyard area. So we've been meeting regularly over the past few months, and we did just this week submit a project proposal letter to the Forest Service. So I have Ash Smith here from SE Group, and she's going to kind of give you the overview of the process and the project and where we're at. And then we also have Adam Bianchi, our Dillon District Ranger, as well as Kat Gray and Corey Richardson, who are going to be processing the application for us, or the proposal for us on behalf of the Forest Service. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ash.
Thank you very much. Since this is the first time that I am updating you guys, I wanted to first introduce myself and SE Group. I know several of you have been working with SE Group in the past, but my name is, oh no, the font. Okay, my name is not, oh no, my name is Ash Smith with SE Group. SE Group is a local recreation and planning firm here. We've helped the town of Frisco with your peninsula plan and working with the Forest Service there, your trails master plan update. We assist the White River National Forest throughout the forest with various recreation, environmental analyses, as well as fuels treatments. So hoping the strange text won't be too inconvenient. Okay. So I think Andy, you may, I don't want to name names, be familiar with this map here. This is a map that, was circulated just preliminarily last year in terms of what the town was kind of thinking when it came to fuels treatments projects. And so I wanted to give you an idea of where we started with when our contract was executed in, I think it ended up being April. Over the past several months, we've done a lot of work with this application. So first of all, back last year, the town was considering sort of a smaller fuels treatment area that's really focused on the corridor immediately adjacent to the town along the rec path and some of those more heavily used user-created trails. So the total there was approximately 230 acres. That's noteworthy that that's what our SE Group contract with the town assumed was a fuels treatment area of about 230 acres. And the trails we were really thinking about as being almost like hub and spoke, where we had a focused area of fuels treatments and then radiating out from that trails projects. So where are we today? Now, This map that you're seeing, I want to preface by saying it's still preliminary. It's not, hasn't been released to the public. This is the map that we submitted this week to the White River National Forest. And this was developed in collaboration so far with Forest Service specialists, but it still has refinement yet to go. So some of the big differences now with this proposal is that we're looking at about 1,200 acres, 1,247, I believe, for fuels treatments. And you'll notice that the fuels treatments extend much further away from the town center there and the rec path in almost like a triangular formation up Miners Creek Road and the trails there. And Kat may go into this if you guys would like, but the rationale behind expanding from 230 acres up to 1,200 acres is there are multiple reasons for that. One of the first is that fuel breaks are more effective when they tie into other fuel breaks to create a consistent area. And as you guys know, there's been quite a bit of work done for Ophir Mountain, as well as some work also around the Rainbow Lake area. Also, Kat did some preliminary fire intensity models using like flame length as an indicator. And given the current condition of the stands out there, it was really apparent that we had some high intensity risk of fire moving backwards away from the rec path that was really critical to capture in these fuel treatments. And then lastly, in regard to the fuel treatments, we also considered sources of ignition as well. And so through Kat's preliminary investigation, Miners Creek Road does serve as a source of ignition from human caused sources with vehicles, et cetera, a heavily used area. And so by capturing those stands that are immediately adjacent to Miners Creek Road was also critically important for the effectiveness of treatments in that area. So, we have that fuels element there. And again, we've spent the past several months working with the Forest Service to kind of refine this around. We're looking at a larger area that right now we're assessing what that means in terms of our contract, which had originally been looking at a much smaller area. The other element of this proposal is the trails. And so if you guys can see on your closer screens, in the overlap area of the green polygons is a network of brown trails. And those are all non-forest system trails, meaning that they're user created over time. Some of them are quite old. Yeah. They haven't been brought into the Forest Service trail network. In some cases, they haven't been constructed at standards that we would expect. And there's also quite a bit of redundancy there. You see a little bit of spaghetti going on in that area. So using Pete's trails data, we've been working at SE Group to categorize those trails, to work with the team on what their desired trail experience is out there, but then also working with our Forest Service counterparts as well, because this area is the forest plan designates the management area for elk habitat. So it's critically important that we're looking at how these trails support and are in conformance with the forest plan management area as well. So at this stage, this proposal is in the hands of the Forest Service as of just this week. And so we are continuing to refine this before it gets developed into a strong, what we call proposed action that would then go out to the public. And we expect the fuels treatments seem to be at a pretty good spot. The trails proposals, we are continuing to work with Forest Service staff to identify which trails would make sense for decommissioning, which would make sense for upgrade and to bring them in as forest system trails, as well as upgrades to some existing forest system trails as well.
All right. So I did want to also give you guys a rundown on what is this environmental review process that we do for the Forest Service and when are we going to be able to interface with the public. So the National Environmental Policy Act requires that any project that takes place on federal lands requires a federal permit or receives federal funds needs to go through this environmental review process. And there's varying levels of environmental review. At this point, we anticipate that this project will be able to be analyzed underneath an environmental assessment. So an EA, there's lots of acronyms with NEPA. The EA is the middle of the range environmental review type. And so there is a process, there's two different basic processes for completing an EA. And right now, our understanding is we're going to be able to move forward using what they call a streamlined EA process. So what this looks like, looking at the flow chart that's on your screen, is we just finished that top bullet where the official project proposal letter has been submitted by the town to the Forest Service. And starting the end of this month into next month, we'll be working with the Forest Service as they evaluate this proposal, see if we need to make any modifications, and then they formally accept the proposal. And then this goes in front of our interdisciplinary team. The past 3 months have been really productive in the sense that we've been able to get the valuable time of Forest Service specialists to look at this proposal before it's officially hit their desk. We're really grateful for that because it means we get a proposal that's that much closer to something that they would entertain on forest system lands. But it's important that we also have the botanists, the forester, the wildlife biologists, et cetera, take a deeper dive into what some of the preliminary concerns would be. So we would expect that that would all happen into the fall, tentatively about September. And then what we would do is then bring the project out for a comment period to the public. And that's what the yellow star is right there. Right now, we still have some steps to go. So I put October-ish, but there are a few steps to complete in order to get that out to the public. And what we do is we put together on behalf of the Forest Service what's called a Notice of Proposed Action, or a NOPA. And that includes a really detailed narrative of the proposal, the purpose and need for the proposal, how it conforms with the forest plan and any other regulations. It also includes project design criteria we may have developed in order to reduce impacts to various resources. And we also make sure to include some preliminary findings on resource impacts. This would be the major time that the public can interface with this project where they would provide input. So it's important for us to give them a really robust idea of what the proposal entails and kind of how much work we've put in so far. All right, so then once that goes out, which again, we're tentatively looking at fall, the public would submit their comments, and SE Group as the consultant would process those comments, put them in a database, sort them by what kind of concern or resource that they pertain to. We do a summary, a comment summary that kind of gives the Forest Service a higher level look of all those comments. And then we all come back together as an interdisciplinary team to review the comments and see if we need to make any tweaks to the proposal or even entertain a new alternative, although usually that's rare when we're in a NOPA process. And then once we feel really firm about the alternatives that we develop, then we get to writing the environmental assessment. That's actually a pretty quick process. We would be looking at most likely delivering that sometime right after the new year. So once that's released, then the EA, along with the draft decision document, goes to the public. And it's important here that we aren't calling it a draft EA. I know I'm getting into the weeds a little bit here, but this streamlined process, we only release one EA. We don't release a draft and then they comment, then we release a final. We're just releasing one EA along with a draft decision. And that decision is open for objection to anybody who commented during the comment period and also has topical standing. You can only object on what you commented on before. So if you commented on wetlands, then you can only object on wetlands like that. And so once that's gone through the objection period, we would be looking at a signature on a decision sometime in May, like spring, early summer of 2023. So that's the overall process and timeline for NEPA. So what are our next steps right now? What are our key things that we've been working on? We mentioned we spent the past couple of months working on that project proposal letter. That's with the forest. We've also been doing a lot of field work. We really want to make hay while the sun shines. So we've been going out, doing our wetland studies, corresponding work with our Forest Service specialists, which they've been really generous to go ahead and start working with us over the summer. So our next steps again are we're going to continue to work with the Forest Service to refine this proposal and get it ready for public scoping. The other thing that I'm working on right now too is what does the larger fuels treatment area mean in terms of our current contract? And so I'll be working over the next month or so as we refine the proposal and we look at some of those key areas to see where are some areas that we may be able to work within our current scope that we have executed and where we may need to come for a contract amendment. But that's something that I don't know at this time. I think it's the summary there is that I'll be back to let you know where we are with that portion there. So that was kind of fast, but wanted to open it up for any questions. And again, Forest Service, really grateful that they're here because they'll be able to answer some really Forest Service specific either resource questions or procedural questions. And you'll hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Thank you, Ash. Appreciate that. I'll start off on that. I think it was that second slide where we had the new map, or maybe the third, the now. There we go. And I don't know who's best to field this one, but it looks like that's a fairly updated satellite image. Is that all the work done on fuels reduction on Ophir Mountain and kind of on that more eastern side where this is delineated? Is that what the fuels reduction will look like in this area for the most part? Is that
From an aerial view,
yeah?
most likely, a lot of these treatments will be clear cut with leaf tree, which means we're leaving spruce, fir, and aspen.
Perfect.
Right, so it's basically taking the lodge pole out. And so from a high view, it'll look similar to that. Now, I will say when we go into NEPA, we take a larger chunk view, and that starts to get actually whittled down to the actual unit size based off of slope access, wetlands, all kinds of other things start to whittle that unit down to the treatment size to actually what it is. So we start larger and we analyze larger to allow us the flexibility to then actually, when it goes out onto the ground or goes into a contract, it always, I'll say 99.9% always shrinks to something smaller to actually what can be completed on the ground was practical.
Appreciate that.
I think that's a great point. Also, like we've already done some preliminary field work and this area is very rich in resources. There's a lot of cultural resources out there associated with mining. We've got some high quality wetland habitat there as well that would need to be avoided, fens. And so while we're developing this preliminary proposal to be able to get started, once all the field work is done, we look at project design criteria to reduce effects. Like Adam was saying, you have slope restrictions, et cetera. Even after the NEPA process, when they go to layout on the ground, they start to identify even more restrictions that make the actual treated area within those treatment units smaller.
I've used the slope excuse as to why we're not making better backcountry skiing further up outside of this map. And then I guess the other question is, and Ash, this might be for you, so you can take a shot at this and not put that group into a position, but how close to when we see kind of that after the period, can we start simultaneously looking at going out to putting bids together before the record of decision signed? Do you feel comfortable?
Yes, I mean, that is, we're more and more, when we want to turn on a dime, need to be able to make some assumptions on decisions. We're very careful, when it comes to the implementation phase, that planning language uses, terms that aren't pre-decisional. And so there may be an assumed alternative, and we just have to be really careful with that, so to speak. But it's common to have to get the ball rolling on some of those contracting elements, prior to decision being signed.
Because I think if ideally that May, June timeline for record decision came out, would be great if we were already ready to roll going into the summer
Mhm.
opportunity and not miss an entire,
Are you thinking about for recreation projects or for fuels projects?
both, all,
Okay.
anything.
I
Any which one we can get or all of them if possible. So yeah.
There are some sequencing elements of this that we'd want to make sure to consider. I think it was you, Kat, who brought up last week. We would want to imagine going in and doing all that beautiful trails work and then bringing all the fuels treatment things, and you'd have to do repairs, et cetera. And so that's part of the proposal development that we're looking at now, and why we want to make sure that we do it right is some of that sequencing considerations. So also when it comes to fuels treatments, I'm thinking of the Summit County Wildfire Council and going for grants or getting contractors out on site to do the necessary pre-work. It can take a bit to get those contracts under place, and then also staffing, as we've seen in this current climate, can be pretty challenging. So realistically, while it would be great to implement fuels treatments in 2023, it may be that post NEPA decision pre-groundwork activity that would take place rather than the actual removal of trees.
Jump in, Andy.
I'll jump in. So 2 years from this point, before we have boots on the ground, cutting trees and all, which I think is really pretty sped up compared to, if we weren't even close to here. So thank you all to everyone's input and all, because we've gotten here, because the Forest Service has been willing to work with us, and Adam's given us a lot of direction. I'm on the Summit County Wildfire Council, and just so you know, this was we were looking for new projects, and so we collectively put this plan together, and we ended up down this road. So now that the plan has expanded well beyond the initial, some of my questions are a little more based in, where, at what point is it well beyond our responsibility, and does it lay on Summit County to be, a big player in this, a partner in this? And then also, I think it's on us, since we're the planning body, that we're going to have to figure out funding well beyond what we're going to put into this. And so that's Summit County, that's going to be Denver Water, that's going to be who knows how many other possibilities. We might be able to get some non-endemic money from Walmart and Whole Foods because of the potential impact to their operations. So I've got lots of questions there. I think that's to come, and that's not necessarily for you.
Well, I do think it's very timely. We are seeing a pretty drastic change in the regulatory funds that are available for wildfire mitigation. I'm going to kick this over to Adam, because I know that he's had some ideas and some thoughts when it comes to implementation.
Yeah, great questions. Exactly where my head's been going as well through this project. We do this work. This is our bread and butter, right? We're used to doing this work, and we've gotten pretty creative on creating good partnerships to come up with the money to implement this fuels reduction work. It's a high priority, for the Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, and as well as our congressional representatives. And they've shown that most recently through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And much of that money is going to the Front Range. However, I do feel that there will be opportunities for us to capitalize on those dollars from implementation standpoint. And so between some extra funds there, I do think that we have great relationships with, you mentioned Denver Water. The Summit 1A Strong Future Funds has been huge for us as well. Wildfire Council, you name it. We've had opportunities. And sorry, yeah, the National Forest Foundation, also through the Ski Conservation Fund, has another potential big player here as well. Especially on the recreation standpoint too, on the trails piece. And so I think there's a lot out there that we're used to working with. And I think in the previous conversation, you used the word leverage. And I do that a lot in my position here as well. And so I feel very comfortable from an implementation standpoint that we will figure out ways to get this thing paid for, that we're not necessarily coming back to the council here asking for that support. I think we can get creative enough and there's enough support for that. It's the planning that always hangs us up. Nobody really wants to help us and pay for the planning piece. You guys are stepping up to help us, talk through that, and already had FSC Group kind of on the hook there to help us do that. And I think that's where really what I see is the most benefit and support right now is what we need is to continue working on the planning, the implementation. I do feel that we can continue to get it paid for through different partners.
Yeah, and so while implementation planning isn't necessarily part of the project phase that SE Group is assisting with right now in the NEPA, I do think when the next time that I come and present to you, it's going to come up because when we talk about this larger planning area and how we can get the planning done within the town's allotted budget and what you guys are seeing, having contributions outside of what you had originally thought for implementation can help the planning budget a little bit there as well.
Yeah, just to also add, the necessity of all this is, Steve Lipsher said at one of the Summit County Wildfire Council's meetings, he was like, if we did nothing here, because this is the other option, we can go down the road, we could do nothing. He said he envisions Frisco, the ash storm on Frisco that would have solved Frisco is Paradise, California. We are no different, right? And so we live right in there, and if we don't plan for this, then it's gonna burn us. Oh. Oh, yeah, it would be theoretically, because that's how, the forest is designed to burn.
Yeah, so the NEPA is going to explain the existing conditions. We do have in our scope modeling what the existing conditions, what would happen should a fire occur within this area. We'll really be able to model the alternatives once we get to it and their effectiveness on, lowering fire intensity, allowing firefighters to enter and fight those fires effectively and safely. And I really, again, just want to emphasize that this pre-planning stage was really critical in order for this fuels proposal to make sense and ultimately be effective on the landscape, tying into the projects that have already taken place that are approved but have not yet been implemented, and then considering Miners Creek Road, et cetera. It strengthens the proposal. So we feel really good about that. And thanks again to Kat for bringing that to us.
Questions, curiosities? I would just say, I think, and Adam mentioned it, and this is just for council's sake, but I think this is where staying in touch with our federally elected folks, and like Julie Suter, most importantly, with her new job as Congressman Negus's local liaison. Congressman Negus has a new bill. He's proposed the Wildfire Response Drought Resiliency Act, and I think there is more bipartisan federal interest because this is happening, and the more that we can continue to tell, and I know I've talked to Hickenlooper staff and Bennett staff as well about this project and how important it is to us, the more they hear that from us as electeds and what this impact could do for our community, and how these partnerships, like Adam said, that we're willing to fund the front end work is so important to hear. And then that helps us kind of push that money towards us to make the funding, once it's all approved and ready to go, happen. So the earlier and more we can be bugs in their ear now, I think once this is done, it's easier for us to call them up and say, hey, here's the whole document, let's do it. So I think, and I'm happy to get you those contact info for the senators, liaisons for the local area too. So.
The goal, having shovel-ready projects, being able to say, we have these projects that are ready to go, we just need funds, really is incredibly effective to getting those funds released, as opposed to having those dollars earmarked for projects that have not yet gone through this ground truthing in this environmental review. So that could tee this up, even if it's execution of it would be in pieces over time, but you'd still know that those were ready to go.
I'm going to assume you know, but I'm going to say it, that we do have a federal lobbyist on retainer, basically. So whenever it's time to have those conversations, you know, that's a conversation we should be pushing. It seems like now.
Officially a project, yeah.
I do appreciate this conversation, but I'll tell you, it makes my life a lot easier if we just work through a little bit of the system. Because usually then what happens is sometimes if it kind of goes there and then I get told to go do something and we're not either ready or we don't have the fundings outlined yet, or our NEPA's not done, we've got other, right? And so sometimes it's meant well, but oftentimes it does get pushed down a little bit differently back here to the ground. And I can't get into a lot of those things in my job, but I'll just say that I appreciate the conversation, but if we could just be talking before some of that would be really helpful before it happens.
If my comments were anything other than letting you know that there is somebody available for
Yes, thank you.
whenever and however that becomes beneficial to the process, we want to utilize everything we've got to the best
Thank you.
of our abilities.
Well said. Direction.
Not my direction. Again, I don't have anything to do with it.
Dictates. Yeah, follow the system. Appreciate that. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for all of that. Thanks for all your work and looking forward to this. Thanks, Susan. Don't want to screw up the system. The system.
And into yours, Lindsay. Hit escape.
Is the Shark Week presentation?
Escape on the keyboard.
We're waiting for it.
Like that was a dig on Lindsay or something.
Weird.
Mega shark.
Something, yeah.
I watched it.
Me and the Orson Welles crowd.
Oh, that's funny.
Mega story, I don't know.
That's it.
You watched it too. You're in good company. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Throwing the kid under the bus. There it is.
There it is.
You ready, Lindsay?
Are you guys ready?
I think so. So this will be agenda item number 3, and this is the after-school programming update. And I'd just like to pre-update that with thank you for being here and being ready after a small run this last weekend, 100
Small
miles
run.
in 30 some hours. What'd you finish it in? 35 hours.
Yes, thank you.
Nice work. That
Thank
is
you.
Awesome.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk to you about what we are very passionate about and feel strongly about and want to get your input on this after-school childcare crisis. So I'm just going to kind of run through a few things with you. I'll address the after-school crisis that the county is currently facing. We'll talk about some current program offerings that our staff has implemented and wants to continue to implement. We'll review the survey results and just the need of the services, give some staff recommendations, and then wrap up with some conclusions. So just to kind of start things off, this after school crisis, kind of how we got here, what this means. I think most of you know that Keystone ran a very successful after school program called Catch. It was a science-based activity program. They started it in all 5 of the elementary schools. Eventually Town of Breck kind of took over the after school program, the Catch program in Breckenridge, but then they continued to run in the other parts of the county, the North End, as well as in Frisco. And that program ran 5 days a week. The most recent numbers we had from them were about 25 kids a day for this last 2021-2022 school year. Came to an abrupt end in March of 2022 when they no longer had enough staff to run the program. And so the program stopped at the end of March, which then led to what now is many are referring to as the after school crisis. And so the Summit Foundation sent out an email on July 12th that said to the youth organizations, basically all of the folks in the county that either organize or implement or are part of just youth services here in the county. And the email stated, as you know, we are facing an after-school crisis in our community, and many families are scrambling to find care so that they can work and know their children are safe and even having fun. So again, this email went out on July 12th, and then in the background of things, a task force has been created that are trying to figure out, again, primarily on the north end of the county, what to do to provide care since there's this gap in service, primarily at Silverthorne, Dillon Valley, and Summit Cove Elementary. So just kind of let you guys know what we currently offer here. The Town of Frisco Programs Division has run after-school programs, session-based programs for over 6 years, roughly 2 to 4 days a week. Those programs include many outdoor activity exercise-based programs. I'll go over a couple of those with you. We've done mountain biking, skateboarding. We have an after-school Nordic ski program called Little Vikings. We do a library program, a historic park program, art programs, and a science-based education program called Snow Education. A couple of these programs I've mentioned are operated by third-party contractors who are hired to implement the programs. However, our staff is always on site with the contractors just to make sure the programs run smoothly. And then the other portions of these are run by Town of Frisco staff. Also, youth sports organizations in the county. There's a variety of them that continue to offer after-school activities. But currently, there's no other entity consistently running after-school programs at Frisco Elementary, which is why we're here to discuss this with you guys today. So we were able to send out a survey to Frisco Elementary parents, and we were super excited to have 70 people respond, which in the world of surveys, sometimes you never know what you're going to get. So we were very excited, read through those with a fine-tooth comb, sent that out on July 6th with these 4 questions stated here. And these next slides will show you the results of those, which you guys also got in your council packet. So we just kind of surveyed one to see what ages we're looking at for the parents that were completing the survey. And as you can see, everywhere from pre-K, which is 5, to those 5th graders. And then what days a week do you need after school care? We were pretty surprised to see there was an equal amount all across the board, Monday through Friday, of when parents would be looking for that after school care. And then the reason we kind of asked this question of, do you foresee what months? A lot of parents, have session-based, whether it's soccer, it's basketball, it's scouts, certain times of the year. So we weren't sure if there were certain times that they would need care over others. But this survey let us know that year-round care is really what most families are looking for. And then the after-school program types. We had a lot of just kind of fill in the blank, some answers, but parents did seem to be pretty happy with what we've been offering. So 37% were looking for sports outdoor-based activities. And then 39% were educational activities. And then we had on there 26%, I think, if I can read that tiny number, art-based activities. So again, variety of programs, which is what we have strived to offer and will continue to strive to offer, because as we know, a lot of the kids, they have different things that they want to do after school to keep them busy. So moving on to the staff recommendation here, we do acknowledge that providing after-school care is a priority, and we take our role very seriously to be able to provide care, keep the kids safe, having fun here in Frisco. Staff is prepared to implement after-school care for Frisco Elementary starting on the first day of school, which, believe it or not, is less than a month, August 18th. And we would look to run after-school care 5 days a week through June 1st, 2023. What this kind of looks like of what we came up with was 20 kids a day. Now that's based on, you might think is on kind of the low end. That's based on staff. If we're able to have enough staff, we can up that number. The spaces we'd be looking to utilize are licensed for more than 20 kids. But again, that's just assuming The lowest number of staff we could operate on is 2, but if we can get more staff in there, we could up that number. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we'd roll into the program right after the kids get out at 3:55 and stop the program at 5:30. Wednesdays is the early out day, so 3:05 to 5:30. The fee that we'd be looking to charge is $15 a day for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then $20 a day for that extra time for those Wednesday early outs. Location primarily out of Frisco Elementary. That's just the home base. It's easy. The kids are there. They roll out of school, they meet us, and we roll into the programs. However, a lot of the programs we have offered, especially in the fall and then sometimes in the spring, happen over at the Frisco Nordic Center. That's our state licensed facility. So before and after Pete and his team are wrapped up at the Nordic Center, it's pretty neat to be able to have the kids over there riding their bikes, playing disc golf in the skate park, in the bike park, just more outdoor based than being at the school. Also, it frees up some space at the school because there are other activities that are utilizing the gym in the classroom. So we'd primarily look to be at our Frisco L. However, if we can utilize the Nordic Center as well and provide transportation in our 15-passenger vans, we would look to do some programs over there as well. So just kind of looking at the costs here, there was a little bit more detailed of numbers in your packet, but 2022, the request that we'd be looking at for you guys is a total of $18,500 just for the remainder, the beginning part of the 2022 school year. Yes, the end beginning of 2022, 2023. 2 additional part-time staff would be roughly $11,000 to help run those programs. And then program supplies, roughly $7,500. And as you know, this spans over 2 budget cycles with the 2022, 2023 school year. So then 2023 budget to kind of encompass an entire school year, continue on with those 2 part-time staff for roughly $23,000. Program supplies, roughly $15,000. And then also really the overall cost to run this program would be an estimated $60,000. What's not listed on here is the staff time for our 2 full-time year-round staff that we have, Grant and Acadia, that currently run all of our youth programs and no school day programs. So that's the number that's not in here. It was in the packet, but looking at roughly $60,000 for an entire school year to run that program as far as costs go. And then the anticipated revenue with the fees that we listed earlier would be $41,000 to $62,000, looking at roughly 171 days of after school care. And then those would be the estimated days, give or take a couple of days in there. Just kind of the conclusion here is we realize there's a need for after school to have continuous care at Frisco Elementary. Our staff have the knowledge, skills, and expertise to run a successful after school program. The impact up to the budget is minimal. And so I'm here tonight to just ask you all if you are supportive of our staff moving in the direction of continuing and adding on to our after school care options.
Please jump in.
So I'm wondering if, because you had said that you could go with 20 kids with the staffing that you have now, is there any possibility of getting maybe high school kids?
That's great. I'm glad you actually mentioned that. That's one thing I forgot to mention. Yes. So we have in the past, as you know, we have a lot of high school students that work in our operations, Marina, Adventure Park. We do currently right now, I think have 4 high school students and like 6 college students working for our summer program. So yes, we would definitely reach out to the high school. I know they have a job fair coming up here in the fall, but we have some contacts at Snowy Peaks and Summit High of some teachers who work with students that maybe are looking for like a work release program, or just students that maybe don't have, as many hours to be in class that want some work. So yes, we would definitely do that. And then we have a very solid summer staff right now that I'm confident that some of them may be interested in rolling over to help with this program. But definitely we really enjoy having the high school kids because they come back year after year.
And I don't know if you know this answer, but can that be some of their community service hours that they're required to have?
So it can, and it kind of depends on the student and the program. We've also been talking with human resources to see if there's a way we can just build some type of program where the kids could get credit for working with the town of Frisco. I know town of Silverthorne's done a couple of things with the lifeguard program in the past. I just need to get details of that, but it's definitely something we could look into.
Are you exploring funding sources, especially for scholarship kids? I assume how'd you base the rate that you've proposed? And what are we doing for sliding scale situations, and whether it's the foundation or Epic Promise or all the groups that Dillon Theater is currently pursuing.
Yes, I know. And I'm sure you saw that article in the paper today. That was a great,
Throughout, but
perfect.
so it's just kind of a, what else are we doing to give the opportunity to families that $250 a month is too much?
Great question. So currently, I think we don't actually have a lot of scholarship requests. I'll tell you that right out of the gate. It's been a few years since we've actually had families on the CCAP assistance program as well. I mean, I think it's probably been 7 or 8 years. So I think the need for Frisco Elementary families, it's probably there. Some of them maybe haven't asked, but I don't think it's as prevalent as maybe in the north end of the county. We do have some money in the budget for scholarship opportunities. We do need to kind of create what that program looks like. I think if we were to go down this road, we would just simply use the free and reduced lunch program. That was kind of what Keystone used in the past. It's what Breckenridge uses. It's just an easy way to work with the school district to just kind of keep it simple and not have to get too in the weeds with families. A cool thing that we do offer that I think helps families maybe not need scholarship is we do a payment program. So basically any family who signs up for the whole summer for any of their camps, or you sign up for 3 months at a time, instead of you having to pay 6-7 grand for the entire summer, we do a monthly payment plan. So parents have been very appreciative of that. Our software system can do that very easily. So that at least breaks it down for parents. So it's not this huge chunk of money, but we would explore building the scholarship program, really making parents more knowledgeable about it, and most likely go with the free reduced lunch program. We have to work out some details, but a lot of our colleagues in the county have the ball in motion with the scholarship program. So we would lean on them to just kind of give us a little bit more guidance on what's worked and what hasn't worked.
I think we can use the frustrating model of the preschools where we are constantly asking them, how much does it cost you to run your school? And it seems like an easy question, but it's a very difficult one. And then build down the cost. So if the conversation is going to go outside of us 7 for funding, a lot of it's going to be, all right, what's it cost us to run the program? Divide that by the number of students. The real cost is $30 a day. But we need a subsidy from the town and other potential sources to make that affordable to all, if we choose to make it affordable to all, or just those who need us to make it affordable to them, meaning that.
Yeah, and that's been pretty consistent with so previously we've done session based. So that means, your kid signs up for 4 weeks of bike camp. They meet Monday and Wednesday for those 4 weeks. And that session based broke down to anywhere from right around $15 per day is kind of where we came up with that. We also have looked at, our model follows very closely to what Breckenridge does. And just kind of seeing what they're offering for what their cost is, I guess, or what fee they're charging. And so that this fee is very consistent with what parents are used to paying for any of the after school programs they've already done with us.
Yeah, but at that fee, that's the fee that the market is, that our peer group is charging.
Yep.
But we don't know what it's costing us. Meaning if there's 2 full-time employees that are going to be doing it, if there's already a request to us, and I don't truly understand how much we should be expecting as the town. What are you asking for the school year to make this program run as proposed? If it's $75,000, okay, meaning that's the ask.
Right.
That's the gap we have to fill. So that's just it's constant frustration of, that's what we're charging. Do we know what it's costing us?
Yeah, definitely. We can break those numbers down because program supply costs, we don't do anything extravagant, right? And facility fees, whether it's at the elementary school or in our own facility, those are very nominal as well.
And I think what Lindsay's getting at too, we have 2 full-time year-round employees who are currently within the programs division in addition to Lindsay. And so it's just taking their time as well and figuring out the portion of their time that is then being dedicated to the after-school program, right? And so there's already a portion of that through the programs that Lindsay mentioned that we're doing. So this would just be taking more of their time. We have to reallocate their time a little bit in order to make that happen as well, with the addition then of some part-time staff so that we don't burn the 2 of them out either, running a program 5 days a week.
All important. And if we want to take this out for additional funding sources, these are just the questions that are going to come up.
I'm in full support. And I think, even if we can't get additional funding sources, if there are needs for scholarship or supplement at the cost versus benefit, I'm fine finding that money wherever we need to.
So Lindsay, a couple of things. I think it's important to note to the group is the Little Vikings program already utilizes the vans and the shuttle system. So you're
Right.
not recreating anything. This already exists. So
Correct.
A great positive, right?
Yes.
I like Andy's idea, like knowing what things cost is always a good thing, right? But the math that I'm seeing with the folks paying in versus the ask, we're looking at $20,000-ish to have this program go for the school year, is what I'm hearing. And then in addition to that, if we're taking folks from the summer youth programs.
That's just till Christmas time, till the end of the year.
The next-
Then we have two
Yeah.
more.
Months, and then it'd be the 2023.
We budget for 2023 for the school year to go through June. Plus, we budgeted then to keep the program going if we keep it going through the fall and winter season. So, right, the school calendar
Right.
doesn't follow our budget, which is funky, but the 20,000 or the 18,500 is for just this, an additional budget for 2022.
Oh, I thought I saw both years on there. Okay. Either way. For a worthy program. And then. So does this create an opportunity to take some of those summertime staffs and move them into, we played with the 18-month jobs and that had mixed success. 10 month, was it 10 month? No, 18 month.
18 month.
10 month.
Now I know how you get all the
Yeah,
extra time. You got an 18-month calendar.
Yep. So you know what I'm getting at, right? And we're not gonna figure that out tonight, but just ideas. And then. I guess that's all. I just. It's a need, right? The catch program was great. You guys have been supplementing it. Oh, that's what I was gonna ask is. Do the residents of Frisco have priority or it's all the same, or you guys are gonna work those details out later?
And so we do the residency or work Copper Frisco residency work pass. We check it every summer for folks registering for summer programs. The uniqueness about the after school program is it's 98% Frisco elementary students. And so we have not in the past actually had that requirement because if you're a student at Frisco Elementary, I mean, that's primarily who's enrolling in these. We do usually get 1 or 2 kids for the Little Vikings Nordic Ski program from another school, but it's never been, sure, our numbers, they may be battling for numbers, but they're all Frisco Elementary students. And some of them may or may not live and or work in Frisco, but they're a student. So that's kind of what we've just put the priority of. You go to the school, you need to have access to this program.
Yeah, I'm just curious what the
Yeah.
criteria was. Thanks.
Pretty good.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
My only thought, I think, is in registration. And, it is incredibly stressful as soon as the date comes up to be on at 8 AM. Otherwise, you don't get in there. I mean, and that's
Yes.
it. And then you're just out of luck. And all of a sudden, then you have no childcare for, these, especially the work times for the parents that need it. They don't get off work at 3 o'clock to go pick up their kid, so. I don't know what you do there because there's demand and, we can't meet the demand with how
Right.
much help and everything else.
We've pretty well, I think, trained most of the parents and educated them on what to do when we set them up for success, but you do feel bad. when The child doesn't get in because the parent forgot. And that does happen. But we've been moving through the wait list very quickly this summer as well with cancellations
Yeah.
for some of our programs. So there is that opportunity as well.
Good, that's good.
a question then. How many people do get left out?
And I guess we'll have to wait and see, because knowing, and the uniqueness about the catch program was they did have a requirement that they wanted the kids to all attend 4 days a week. So kids would sign up for the program, but sometimes they wouldn't show up because they had other commitments. So then they'd have vacancies, but they didn't have time to fill them. So it's kind of like the number of them having 25 kids a day is, I feel like it's kind of loose. Whereas what we typically for after school programs had anywhere from 15 to 20 kids, usually fill with those kids. So yes, knowing that Catch had potentially 25, was there some crossover between their program and ours? There was a little bit. I mean, we're really hoping that we can get maybe a third staff member to be on there to up that number closer to say 25 or 30. Because again, our space does allow, but knowing that there's other Girls on the Run, Optimist basketball, high country soccer, scouts, that the kids, and we would do registering day by day. So if your child has soccer every Tuesday, you're not signing up for the whole week. So hopefully that will allow more kids to actually come to the program. And the supplemental programs that are out there will hopefully be staffed but we'll just, I honestly, I have no idea, but knowing that we've had small wait lists for our programs after school, 15 to 20 kids, they've been nothing compared to what our summer programs are. But it's also helpful to know there's other after school options, just nothing consistent. And the other ones are just more seasonal.
And I am with Andy in that if we can figure out, and that's not anything that happens quickly, but we've got the vans, right? But that doesn't mean it doesn't cost anything to run the vans, I mean, and that all goes into the cost of, each kid. We've got 2 shuttle vans then going over to, from the school to the adventure park, and that's not very far, but that's gas. And, so all of that is cost built in, and I do believe, we will absolutely fund whatever you need for this, but we should utilize our lobbyist and try to get federal funds, just because then we
don't
don't
even need
have
to go outside the county for people who are desperate to spend money on this project.
Right. That's good news. So thanks.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. I'm good.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lindsay.
There's a town stepping up to fill a void that I don't know if others are, but this is really
I mean,
This is.
we're excited.
You and the group has stepped forward when a lot of people are stepping back right now. So thank you.
Yep, we have the passion and the energy, and just get a couple more staff on there and we will make it happen.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Schedule, when does that happen? We will take a break and be back at 7. I know hopefully, I don't know who's coming for public comment.
We are having people coming.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Congratulations on finishing your 10 years.
Oh.
That's what you did, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I would do. 31 hours.
No, 35. You can go faster. It was a shuffle. It was a lot of shuffling, but it was good.
My boys just ran a 50-miler, so.
No, it was the Buena Vista. It's called the High Lonesome 100.
Okay.
It's not Mountain Back like Leadville. We have no desire to do Mountain Back on cheap roads.
Yes, we're going. We're rolling, folks.
Parking is a photocopy. Yeah, photocopy of the ticket. Asking us to-
I do not see him on the list.
And then they're all taxpayers.
Wife's out of town. We didn't watch what we want.
Your microphone's on. man.
It is hot.
Hi, honey.
She's doing it. Good evening, everyone. 7 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Frisco Town Council. This time we'll open it up to public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment may do so now. Please be topic specific for anything that is not on this evening's agenda. State your name and address for the record and keep your comments no longer than 3 minutes. If you're online, you can unmute yourself. Seeing no public comment.
Wait, he just left. He's
Yeah.
gone.
All right, seeing no public comment, I will close public comment and back into mayor
Now
and
he's
council
back.
comments. I would just say, I think it's kind of interesting, like tonight, that we talk about the collaborative work of working with the county, with private partnerships, the state, with the workforce housing lot, and the Forest Service all being here. I think we're doing good things, and showing who we're trying to work with and what we are doing is pretty impressive. So I appreciate that and everyone's participation on all levels there. So. Next, is there any additional staff updates, Diane, that weren't in the packet? Great. We are on to the consent agenda. Mr. Mayor.
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Then move to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Helenko's. Discussion on the motion. Call the question, please.
Aronson.
Yes.
Burley absent, held. Incan,
Yes.
Palenko,
Yes.
Scripsack, Adrian absent, Mortensen.
Yes.
Thank you.
And next up is old business agenda item number 1. This is second reading of ordinance 22-08, an ordinance amending chapter 9 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco, Colorado concerning bidding procedures and contract formation by amending sections 9-1 concerning formal bidding requirements, 9-3 concerning bid specifications, and 9-9 concerning an exception to bidding requirements for coordinated purchase programs. Open public hearing, turn it over to Dylan. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'd like to start out by informing you guys, I just learned this was passed on the first reading with a unanimous decision. Hopefully we can do that on the second reading as well. This ordinance is changing our purchase amount authorizations. The last time that was updated was in 2007. The buying power in 2007 compared to now just isn't the same. So we use the Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI index of inflation and adjusted those 2007 amounts to what they would be today. The second part of this ordinance is allowing us to enter into cooperative purchasing programs with other governments that will help us more efficiently purchase anything with the town. It gets us lower pricing and it's more efficient just in the timing of it. Those agreements do not change the coming to council for approval on anything higher than what is already set. Any questions? Please let me know.
Questions?
It's been a long night. I just want to get through it.
Yes, I'll open up for public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment on this agenda item may do so now. If you're online, you can unmute yourself and I'll call on you. See no public comment, I'll close public comment. Back to council discussion, perhaps a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 22-8.
Been moved to approve on second reading 22-08 by Council Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Aronson. Is there any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Burley absent, Held,
Yes.
Incan,
Yes.
Palenko, Scripsack Adrian absent, Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you guys for always being so unanimous when I come to you.
I'm a little hurt that you admitted that you don't watch these.
First one, but I,
When you bring obviously good ideas to us, we'll be unanimous. Thank you all very much.
And for those of you who don't know too, Dylan is in a new role. Congratulations as well. Yes.
hiring a new position in the finance department and with that, my accounting position is now the finance manager, senior financial manager.
Thank you. Well deserved. Yeah.
Long 13 years and I look forward for another 13 to come at least. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dylan.
Go for it.
Solid effort.
6 months.
Solid effort.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you so much all.
Happy
Bye.
birthday.
Bye, guys.
Ever.
I guess our last.
Yeah, I think not. Oh, yeah. I just passed my interstate, they do.
Right?
Oh, yeah, it's on
Right.
Zoom.
Last meeting.
They're fine. We got.
Yep.
Jesse.
Yeah.
Jesse.